Beyond the Rails reset the other day, so I wanted to make a showcase going over floors 11 and 12 of this new cycle. We're starting with the builds up front again, and you can pause to take a look at any of them if you're interested, but just like last showcase, the builds are still not very good. Especially when we get to the Lacrimosa team, where we're running Lacrimosa on a blue speedy hedgehog, because I still have not farmed any gear at all. I am at Hunter level 45 now, which was the bare minimum before I wanted to start gear farming, but if I'm able to clear endgame with multiple minutes to spare still, there's still not really any reason to go farm gear at this point. So it looks like I'm just going to be putting that off until I do hit Hunter level 50, and then it's at its highest efficiency. I mentioned at the end of the last showcase that I was planning to bench Chiz and just switch to a Lacrimosa team as my second team, and that's what I ended up doing, so we do have a new team to show off this time. So I'll be doing my best throughout the showcase to mostly focus on that team and how I've been playing it and the things that I try to do with my gameplay. So let's get into the showcase. We're starting with floor 11 and Lacrimosa on this first side here. So I'm still very much in the process of trying to figure out how to play Lacrimosa well because she is still brand new. But even with that, she's been performing more than well enough. Basically, we're playing her in a Discord team, so her with Sakiri, Haniel, and Daffodil as well, and the goal at the start is basically just put all of the buffs up. I like to switch to Lacrimosa's ranged mode relatively early on into the fight, which I did right before switching to Daffodil here. And then for her basic attacks, her basic attack 5 is a very long cast time that also just hits for less damage than her BA4 does, at least when she's in her ranged mode. So you're gonna see me dash cancel her basic attack 5 quite a bit, or swap cancel off of it and do another action while she continues to cast it from off field. And she does also have a passive that increases the damage Discord does if you use it on a broken enemy, which I choose not to go for in this case here, where we do the swap to Sakiri. I'd rather just keep the Scorch uptime full because she buffs the dot damage from our Nightmare ticks whenever Scorch is applied. And the extra damage that we do get from Discord doesn't seem to be too big, at least at this point. Or at least not big enough that it's worth the stress of trying to play around it, at least in my opinion right now. Unless you have like A6, and then it becomes a lot easier to actually do so. But with an enemy like Tomato Devil especially, who moves around quite a bit and also doesn't really have many moves that you actually have an opportunity to parry, getting the Esper cycles up can be quite a bit time consuming, and in this case I'd rather just try to keep as much Scorch uptime as we can. But you'll see on floor 12 we get quite a few more parry opportunities, and that starts to let us go for some more Discords throughout the fight without sacrificing Scorch uptime. So on the topic of parries, we only got one parryable attack in this entire fight here, which we got on Daffodil there, so we can use that to trigger a Discord, and you'll see the extra damage that we get here. It's not a huge tick, but getting to show it off at least once is nice. And then Mosa's ult, which just came off of cooldown, is enough to finish this off. So that does it for the first side, and then second side, we have our Nanally team, which we're basically just doing the exact same thing that we did in the last showcase. So we Hattori skill to start her recording, 0 ult to get our attack buff up. Then we record 0's redirect skill and Joyuen's support skill. We ult with her because we have it up, and then we switch to Nanally to record her redirect skill and then go into her ult and do her DPS window. Beat King is a bit of an aggressive boss, so we do have to dodge quite a bit during Nanally, which does hurt our DPS a little bit, but it's not too terrible. And then once we fill Nanally's cycle gauge, we switch to 0 for her support skill and redirect skill, then switch to Joyuen for her support skill and redirect skill, and then we go into Hattori to do her ult. And then coming out of Hattori's ult, because we recorded 0's redirect skill earlier, she has full cycle gauge, so we ult again to get that attack buff back up, and then we can just switch to Nanally to immediately do her support skill. And then we go back to her normal DPS window, we do her ult, and we just combo with her. And then again, when the gauge is full, we switch back to 0 to get another support skill, and then we basically repeat the entire rotation. So Hattori redirect skill, 0 redirect skill, Joyuen support skill, and ult. And then normally we would switch to Nanally and record her redirect skill, but I hold this skill here so that we can get a free parry on Beat King when it does this attack. By doing that, we miss out on recording Nanaly's skill, but it doesn't actually matter because Hattori's ult is gonna kill anyways, so all I care about at this point is just getting back to Hattori before her ult is up. And by getting the free gauge fill from that parry on Nanally, it just makes everything quite a bit smoother in terms of setting up our blossoms. And you'll see I switched to Hattori early. We spam her ult so that we can get it as soon as it's off cooldown, and then Hattori will kill with her ult here. And that does it for floor 11, which is a 2-minute, 21-second clear, and I think with the quality of builds we have on our characters, that's pretty respectable. We're still clearing with a lot of time left over. And then going into floor 12, we're playing the same teams, but in the opposite order. So we're starting with the Nanally stuff against Serenity, which is the plant boss. And this is basically just a punching bag. It doesn't move at all. It doesn't attack anywhere near as frequently as other bosses like Tomato Devil or Morphix, which we'll see next. And we just talked about the full rotation for this team on the last floor, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. I'm just going to let this gameplay show itself, and this is basically the exact same thing that we had on the last floor. And so Hattori's ult kills here. Again, this boss was very straightforward, just the standard Blossom team rotation, but going into the next side, we actually have some interesting stuff. So we do a very specific opening here. I switched to ranged mode on Lacrimosa, I set up all of my buffs, and then I switched to Daffodil and do a combo that consistently parries the disc that Morphix fires, which doesn't actually give any Esper cycle gauge like a parry normally would, but then it also parries the hit from Morphix coming down, which doesn't have a parry ring on it, but it is still a parryable attack, and that lets us fill our cycle and get an early Scorch off here, which is actually really nice. Then we switch back to Lacrimosa for her ult, and then coming out of this, we know Morphix is going to attack. This is also a consistent attack, so we can switch into Daffodil to parry that, get her ult back up, and then that lets us trigger an early Discord. And then we basically have just filled Lacrimosa's cycle gauge up here, so we can switch back into Sakiri, get our Scorch back up, and then reapply all of our buffs, and then we have a damage window here for Lacrimosa to do as much as we can while this boss is broken. So we have a very consistent game plan for the start of this fight because those attacks are consistent, and then after that point, it becomes very similar to what we had with Tomato Devil before, where from here on out, we kind of just play it by ear. We're going to try to keep our buffs up as much as possible, spend a lot of field time on Lacrimosa just doing her basic attacks. But Morphix is also a boss that has a lot more parryable attacks than Tomato Devil, so especially with having Daffodil on this team, if we're able to swap into her and parry with Phantom Step to refill her ult energy, that's extremely helpful. And like I mentioned earlier on Tomato Devil, the fact that these parries are refilling our Esper cycles lets us get a lot more Scorches and Novas, and it lets us actually go for some Discords like we weren't really doing on Tomato Devil. And then at this point, Morphix is pretty low on health and it's about to break, so we do Mosa's ult here because we do have it off cooldown, we want that extra damage. And we end up getting a parry here, which lets us go for a Discord that does break the boss. And since the boss breaks on the Discord, we do actually trigger Lacrimosa's passive still, so we get the extra damage from that. And then we're basically just going to finish off doing Mosa and Daffodil stuff. And this gets us a 2-minute, 15-second clear for this floor, which is even faster than floor 11 was. And I think, again, with how bad our builds are, this is a pretty good showcase of what these teams are capable of. And that does it for the gameplay here, so let's talk about some closing thoughts on the combat specifically, and then also about Lacrimosa and her team because she is new. And to start, the game is really easy, and it's actually gotten easier this cycle than it was in the previous one. So at Hunter level 45, on the last day of last cycle, I went back through with these new teams to try this floor 10 again, and the clears that we're getting on floors 11 and 12 this time around are 40 to 50 seconds faster than the best clear that I got on floor 10 of last cycle. So there's some combination of HP values on the bosses, the buff for this cycle being a bit better, and one of the bosses having chaos weakness, so Lacrimosa actually does some more damage to it. But as a whole, at least from my experience, the DPS checks were a lot easier to reach, and this cycle doesn't have anything that's nearly as frustrating or as hard as floor 8, which I'm happy about, but I was also expecting at least like a slight increase in difficulty as we went into the new patch, and that's not the case here. Now, what I will say is, even though it is really easy, the combat is pretty satisfying. I think that especially with these two teams here, they both feel really fun to play, and I think the enemy lineup and the way that floors have been structured for this cycle is more fun than the previous cycle was. I am hoping that we will see a little bump in difficulty, because if things stay at this level, especially like when we do end up actually farming gear, or when we hit the level uncapped so that we can get our characters up to level 80, things are kind of just going to be a joke. So hopefully, if not in the next cycle, maybe sometime next patch, we see a bit more difficulty here, just so that the combat can actually stay fun and not just be something where you steamroll through everything. And we can wrap up here with final thoughts on Lacrimosa, because she is new. I really like her. She's a great character personality-wise, she's been fun in her story quests, and specifically gameplay-wise, her teams are a lot of fun. She's very good damage-wise, and she also doesn't fit into similar team archetypes to Nanally and Hattori, which is basically exactly what I wanted out of her, so I'm very happy with her performance so far. And I'm definitely still in the stage of figuring out how her team is supposed to work. I'm not the best with maximizing uptimes on the buffs that she's getting from Sakiri and Haniel. I'm also not the best with making sure that I'm always using Lacrimosa's skill off cooldown, and there are many times when I've just had it sitting there for a few seconds where I could be using it and I'm just basic attacking instead. So I'm sure those gameplay issues will kind of iron themselves out as we play her more, but even in this stage, she's been performing extremely well, and she's a lot of fun to be playing. She's also a character who has really good awakenings, which doesn't matter to me right now because I don't have any of them. And again, the combat's also really easy, so the awakenings definitely aren't necessary by any means. But if you're a person who really likes Lacrimosa and you're somebody who likes to hyper invest in characters that you really like, Lacrimosa's probably a good option for that, because her awakenings do seem pretty good. And I think as a whole right now, with the two teams that I've shown through this showcase, I'm actually just very happy with where my account is at, and I don't feel any pressure to pull for characters whatsoever. Outside of Sakiri, who's not a character that I like, but is a very nice partner for Lacrimosa. And I guess you can also exclude the Appraiser as a character, but the other 6 characters across these two teams would be my 6 favorite playable characters in the game right now. So I'm very happy that I'm getting to use all of them and they all work well together. So at this point, I'm definitely happy to just start saving resources for future characters that I would like to pull for. So the big 4 off the top of my head would be Akane for sure, then Blackbird, then probably Elims and Nitsa in some order. I don't know when any of them will be playable, and I don't know if I'll like them kit-wise when they do come out, but at least design-wise, those are the 4 that come to mind initially. But anyways, I'm starting to get off track, so we can cut things off here. If you enjoyed this, you can leave a like, it does help the channel out, and you can also sub for more NTE content. I'll probably have more showcases for other Beyond the Rails stuff in the future, and eventually we'll hit Hunter level 50 and I'll start gear farming and I'll actually start doing some good damage. So that'll be cool. But until next time, thank you so much as always for watching.